Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the information around GCSEs and revision and the role and what a parent and carer can do. So, just to introduce myself, I'm Mr. Lampard. One of my roles as assistant head teacher is raising standards at Key Stage 4. Part of this presentation there'll also be Miss Ring, who's obviously the Year 11 Heads of Year. All of these resources will be available online, so please do have a look, and afterwards there'll be an opportunity for some live Q&A via the chat function. If you do have a question, please do upload your question and then we'll do our best to answer it live this evening after the presentation. So just to start with, some common frustrations that you might have heard as we move forward. So whether it be someone leaving something to the last minute, not wanting to cause extra stress, and not maybe understanding certain aspects of it, or which website or resources to use. Now, many of these you may well have heard, but also this is what this evening's here for, to help you and support the student and your child as best you possibly can. So, looking at some resources, we found some resources that looked at 101 top tips, and the top tip number one for every single one was getting the students into lessons, making sure they're in lessons, and this links to their attendance matters push. Now more than ever, if you can be in school, to be here and to make every lesson, every minute count. Being in school on time is the single most important thing to success as we move forward. So how to make a difference in your involvement is crucial and probably can make the biggest difference to the students as you move forward, having that support from home. So Kevin Collins, the CEO of the Educational Endowment Foundation, actually says that we know that levels of parental engagement are consistently associated with children's academic outcomes. We also know that a parent's job, education and income matters less to their child's development than what they actually do with them. So it's the single biggest input is the things we do with the students and the children at home and can make the biggest difference. And don't worry, we don't all have to be experts in every different subject and revision technique. I know for myself, from having two kids, I'm getting to the end of my expertise with the Year 6 My Maths. But it's taking that time, supporting the children as best we can. You just need to know how to best spend that time you have at each stage of the process, and this is where this evening comes in, and hopefully it will give you an idea as we move forward.
So I'm going to talk you through some of the things that as parents you can be doing to support your child through the next few months. So we're going to talk about some of the different roles that you might find yourself in as we speak about kind of moving towards revision and moving towards exams. So the first role that as parents you might find yourselves having is being the link with the school and child. So being the go-between between those two areas of their work and their life. So one of the first things with regards to that is obviously supporting their attendance as much as you can, as Mr. Lampard said. This is one of the most important things that we can actually be doing. But also, in line with that, supporting students by attending parents' evenings, obviously things that you're doing right now, and hopefully the parents' evening we've got coming up next week, asking questions of staff and of the students, making sure that the issues that you feel that they're having are being nipped in the bud as soon as possible, trying to gain from your students or your child's teachers exactly what is going well, and maybe some of the things that they can be working on over the next few months. Obviously, and all of this kind of encompasses with you working out exactly what your role can be in the home. So as well as that, we've got the idea of making sure that you're providing the right tools for homework and revision. So within this, we're saying that despite what students might say, making sure that they have a calm, quiet environment, a nice place for them to study, away from any distractions in the home, but also away from the distractions of their phones or other electronic devices. So being really clear that revision is a time when none of those things are to be on them. So if that's the case of you kind of taking the phone away from them for a couple of hours, just so they can focus on that revision, that's obviously going to be really important. As well as that, we're thinking about making sure you've got your child's got a good strict revision program. So obviously within this, we do mean and we do reiterate how important it is for them to keep taking breaks. Along with this, kind of making sure they've got the tools that they need for revision, which kind of leads into the next role that we're thinking about, which is that of the banker. So this literally is about you making sure that they're provided with the materials they need. So have they got the revision guides? Have they got any post-its, flashcards, bright colour pens, whatever it takes to make that revision seem a little bit more appealing, and to kind of help them and move forward with that process. The next role we're talking about is the role of the study buddy. So by this, we're saying one of the most successful ways of students actually in the long term remembering and kind of holding on to a piece of information is for them to have to put things into their own words. So it could be as simple as you having a discussion around the dinner table one evening about what they've been revising. Ask them to explain a concept, maybe that's something that you don't understand. So wherever you can and wherever you get the chance to try and show them that you're interested in what they're doing, you're interested in what they're revising, and to get them tested as much as you can on what they've been learning. But yeah, invite them into those conversations as much as you possibly can. I know it might be difficult at times, but if you can get them to that process of having to think about the information and put it into their own words to explain it to somebody else, that is honestly one of the really important and one of the best ways to get revision going. So the other role that you could have is with regards to being a bit of an entertainment officer. Now by this, I'm talking not about what devices and things we should take away from the children, but I'm talking about the role that you can play in terms of supporting them with finding different podcasts, apps, films, different revision websites, anything at all that helps to make that revision a little bit more appealing and kind of what they're studying a little bit more interesting for them. So you might also be able to, by looking online, familiarise yourself with the exam structure, the content, and whatever you can do to get that information across to them in a different and a more exciting format. And again, this is something that maybe you could explore together with your child. Again, building up that relationship, showing that interest that you've got in what they're doing. The next role, so being a sounding board and being an advisor. So we're talking about helping your child to break those tasks down that they've been given into some smaller, more manageable chunks. Okay, keeping an eye on their progress, being there to celebrate their achievements. I am certain that there will be times in all households over the coming weeks and months where students are struggling to stay motivated or feel that things haven't gone the way that they had wanted them to. Okay, so as parents, the more you can do to try and help them, support them, and to kind of get them towards a more positive mindset and find a positive way forward, the better. This one's now going to be really important, especially in the unprecedented times that we're in at the moment. Having spoken to kind of quite a range of students over the last few weeks, it's really clear that this is the thing that they're really struggling with. So by talking about being an emotional supporter, you're listening to their worries, you're managing their feelings, you're being there to pick them up again if things have gone wrong, you're being there to help to find solutions to their problems. If there are problems that they're facing, please do make sure that you're then relaying them to myself or anyone else in the year team so that we can do all we can as well to help to support you. Being a project manager, so making sure that you're agreeing to the rules of homework and revision. This is important. It should be a dialogue. If it's something that's being strictly imposed, 9 times out of 10, the students are going to struggle to keep to it. So make sure that it is that dialogue. It is a work in progress between the student and between you as parents. Try and, again, as we've said, make sure you're balancing in some fun or some downtime within their schedule as well. It's very unrealistic for them to be able to sit there for 3 or 4 hours after school, having been at school all day, and just revise. And do not be afraid to kind of keep revisiting the schedule or the plan. If it's not working, try and look again and find something that works, again, specifically for your child. It will not be the same for everyone. So basically, the long and short of this is whatever your child needs, your role is going to be that person who cares for them the most in the world, who's going to be the champion of their needs, the admirer of every achievement that they make, whatever happens. Moving on, so in terms of revision and the process between revision, learning the information and getting to the exams, we like to talk about it in kind of 3 stages to success. So it's very easy to think about the results, obviously, of the exams coming down to what happens on the day. So are they in the right frame of mind? Do the right questions come up in the paper? Will they remember what they've revised? But in fact, we need to see this as a longer term process. So their results, in effect, are being determined long before they sit in that exam hall and sit the exam. And we'd say that there are three main processes of achieving great exam results. So it's about getting things right, but also being aware of how things could go wrong so that you can be there to kind of help to support them in those different phases. So we've got stage 1, which is learning the content the first time around. Stage 2, thinking about revision. And stage 3, obviously then the final exam itself. So if we take stage 1 and look at that in more detail, obviously this is the stage that happens in the classroom, and every lesson counts and every lesson is valuable. So it's really important that to be able to reach stage 2 and stage 3 effectively, students are in the best frame of mind when they're coming into school and they're learning this content the first time round. And there are some of the barriers that might stand in their way of this being as successful as it could be. So as you can see, we've got things like not getting on the teacher, finding things difficult and getting to the point where they're giving up. And again, you see characteristics of this at some students in the moment. So it's about, as a parent, trying to encourage them as much as you can. It is difficult, it's not always going to be easy, but actually to keep them motivated and encourage them to keep trying. Some students deciding that they're not good at the subject. Again, we'll do as much as we can in school to kind of get rid of that stigma. But again, as much support and encouragement as you can do from home to try and keep them on top of things, to try and keep their attitude as positive as they can, no matter what. Then we move on to stage 2, so we're talking about revision. So no matter who we are talking about here, even the perfect student who's done all of their homework, who's paid attention in every lesson, they will still have to revise and go through this process to achieve their potential. So we'll discuss in a minute a few techniques that you might want to use with students at home in terms of ideas for revision. But again, these are a series of things to just consider in terms of how things might go wrong so that you can make sure that you're getting things right the first time round. So obviously the blanket one of just not doing any revision, leaving things too late, so leaving it to the last minute, not having a clear plan, not being sure of what to revise. Now, as hopefully you're aware, over the last couple of weeks in school, all subjects have been going through the specific things that students should be revising for assessments. They'll be re-going over exam technique and things like that. So it's important that you're there just to kind of keep chipping away, keep reminding them of those things that they've been taught at school. And obviously, again, linking into this, making the most of any revision or activities or lessons or things that are going on in school, and encouraging your child to engage in as many of those as you can. If we look at this graph here, so it kind of explains the curve of forgetting. So as you can see there, the blue line there is, the dark blue line is the forgetting curve. So you can see over time, actually, if things are not being revised, they get forgotten quite quickly. And actually, the more times that students go over things in those periods, so immediately after, 24 hours after, a week later, a month later, the more repetition that happens of the content, the more likely they are going to be to remember it. So stage 3, we're talking about the exam. So obviously, even within the first 2 phases being successfully achieved, things can still go wrong on the day. And we're kind of looking at 3 skill sets that are needed on the exam day. So we're talking about making sure students are knowing the subject materials, making sure they're being organised, and they know the exam technique that they need for that paper. So as well as getting them to revise content at home, it's really important that they go into that exam knowing what the examiner is looking for. So for example, knowing what's required of them for an 18-mark question. So yeah, as well as the revision of the content, please do make sure that you're encouraging them to be as familiar as they can with the exam technique and what they need to do for each question. That does include how long we would recommend that they spend on each type of question, where obviously the marks being achieved. Obviously, there are still ways that things can go wrong, so making sure that they get a really good night's sleep before any exams or assessments, making sure that they're getting up, they're on time, they're getting into school on time, they're packing their bags the night before so that they've got everything that they need with them, and just keeping the process leading up to that exam as calm as is possible to make sure that they are as prepared as they need to be.
So moving on to mindset, a big part of everything we do in school, resilience we show, the work we need to be working towards is all about mindset. And you'll see from the picture on my right hand side just below me, some of the things that this links to. We've been working with Year 11s just before half term and after half term about having a Year 11 mindset. Now, Year 11 mindset means those times when we're in Year 11, we're working towards the exams, we're working towards all the things we need to do, and making sure we're working as hard as we possibly can do. And this links into the second point of controlling the controllables. On page 1 of the revision booklet, it talks about making sure you can control those controllables. Can't be worrying about the things out of your control. You need to be aware of them, but not worrying about them. But controlling those things you can do, things like effort, attitude, preparation, making sure they're as best as we possibly can be. We need to make sure at all times throughout these processes that we maintain motivation and we encourage persistence. And this is where that growth mindset, making sure that because we're finding it difficult, we don't just give up. We actually encourage ourselves to try and work through it, maintain that motivation, and work as hard as we can. And make sure we manage moods. There'll be times when you feel things are getting a bit too much, things are difficult, there's a bit of stress, but it's keeping these things all together and making sure with the right mindset things are moving forward as best we can. One other aspect we've been working with Year 11s is the concept of my future self. And one question we've been asking them to think about is, will their future self thank them for the decisions they're making now? It's still in their control to make the best possible decisions they can, but will their future self thank them for the decision they made all the way through Year 11 and moving forward? Because what happens in this year will have implications for sixth form, college, wherever they want to go and beyond. So it's really important we get these things right. So some tips for revising. Hopefully you've had the revision booklet. We emailed it home. It's on the website, but also the students got an actual copy of that. And there's sessions going on in lesson time. One thing parents can do is talk to their child about how they can support them and what they would find useful, and then supporting with these kind of things. Making a list and a plan so things don't get too much. Getting resources sorted early, so making sure there's plenty of pads of paper, the little revision cards, anything that the student needs are there and it's sorted maybe in a resource box. When I was head of sixth form last year, one of the key things we looked at was at the end of the day, just making notes from each lesson for 15 minutes at the end of the day. So working back through the 3 lessons they've had and making some brief notes. That is the best way of getting it from the short term to the long term memory, and then using these condensed notes to help with revision. One little job I do with my own children is to empty their bag at the end of the day and file the handouts. A 1 minute, 2 minute job, rather than at the end of 3, 4, half a term turns into a massive job and forgetting what they do. Just filing those handouts, and then the conversation can start about what the handouts are. It helps jog those memories again, making sure we're organised. And finding revision methods at work. Now, Miss Ring will be talking about some actual revision examples, hopefully in lesson time over the last couple of weeks. Students have had information from their teachers, because what works for one child may not work for the other child. What works in one subject may not work in another. So they have to find the ones that work best for them, where it does retain the knowledge. Once they've got the right revision methods, it's choosing the aids, making a timetable and helping them stick to it. Just making sure they stick to it. There'll be so much going on. If you can stick to it, you need to make sure that there's time for that work-life balance. If we don't stick to it, then it becomes scrambled. There becomes times when you just feel like you've been revising all day and nothing's going in. Having those set times and sticking to it with the right revision aids is key. Making sure, as a parent or carer, that you just quietly keep things topped up, so that's pens, notepads, things like that. Just making sure it shows you that you're there, you're playing interest, all these kind of things, just to make sure they have what they need. Making sure their favourite snacks and drinks when it comes to revision for the internal exams, or whether it's the actual GCSEs, their favourite snacks and drinks. Maybe not a can of Monster and things like that, and sugary drinks, but things like water and good healthy snacks. Make sure you're flexible, supportive and sensitive, but have regular check-ins just to see how they're getting on. Those little 1-2 minute conversations just about how it's all going, and you may not always get the comprehensive answer you're looking for, but just have those regular check-ins, and being supportive is key. And to keep things in perspective, no matter how big things may feel at the moment, how scrambled things may be, that it's all there. Everyone's here to support, whether it's at school or at home, and there will be support for them at every single stage of the journey, and we're there for them.
Thanks very much, Mr. Lampard. I'm just going to carry on now talking you through a few different examples of techniques and methods that students could use at home for their revision. Now, some of these hopefully will be familiar to them through the work that they've been doing over the last couple of weeks in terms of the revision fortnight that we've been having in school. So the first example I'm going to talk you through is the concept of a revision clock. So first thing students will need to do is to decide on a particular topic for revision. As a history teacher, I'm using a history example here for you. So one of the things that they might need to revise for their Nazi unit is the Nazis' use of propaganda. So as you can see, we've broken that topic therefore down into kind of 5 or 6 chunks by identifying that students need to know about the rallies the Nazis made. They need to know about the use of the radio, newspapers, the Olympics, and their kind of propaganda posters. So I've set up each of those sections of the clock with a different theme within that overall topic that they're looking at. Then what I recommend that you get your child to do is to use any class materials that they've got, to use their revision guides and have those out in front of them as they're then completing each section of the revision clock. So it's not a test of their memory at this point. It's just a process of gathering the most important facts and the most important bits of information that they can. Again, it's really important while they're doing this to reiterate they're never going to remember everything. So to pick out a few specific things, some examples that they could then use in that exam situation to make sure that they've got enough knowledge, but they're not feeling overwhelmed by having everything down there. So while they're doing this, I'd encourage them to have, to use colours, to use pictures, to make it as clear, bright, colourful, as appealing as they possibly can, and also to have a time limit. So for each section, maybe spend 5 or 10 minutes pulling together the information and getting it written down. Obviously, this is then a resource that can be come back to and looked at regularly, or it could be repeated. And we'd hope that they manage to produce something that looks fairly similar to this. So obviously, as you can see, you can break it down into as many sections as students will want to do to relay that topic as best as they can. Example number 2 to talk through is the two-tone spider diagram. So it's a similar concept in the fact that students would pick a particular topic and they would then think about how that topic can be broken down. So if you look at the example on the board, we've got global warming and we split that up into the different factors. So the role of the Industrial Revolution, the greenhouse effect, greenhouse gases example. What they then do within each of those is then to break those themes down further. So they might add some key quotes, some key words, some key statistics or equations, depending on obviously what the topic is. Again, encouraging them, particularly if they're a visual learner, to use as many pictures as they can. Once they've created that initial spider diagram, you're then going to give them a little bit of time to revise it. So, okay, around 10-15 minutes or so to really focus on just memorising that process that they've just gone through. I would then give students a blank piece of paper or a blank spider diagram template and ask them to reconstruct that spider diagram from memory. And again, give them kind of 10-15 minutes to do this and see what they remember. We'd then ask them to get their original spider diagram that was fully completed with their notes in front of them and to compare it to the one that they've just done from memory. And what we'd recommend that they do is to add into the one they've done from memory in a different colour pen anything that they missed off from the original. So it really stands out to them the things that they've missed. And we then kind of advise them to repeat this process. So to come back to it maybe in a couple of days and just write down straight away what they'd remember and to compare it to the original. And hopefully the more and more that they're doing that, the less of the second colour pen you'd notice, which would signal they're remembering more and more of it. And it's that process of revision, of repetition, that's going to get that information to stick and move into their kind of long-term memory. Example C, again, requires a little bit of preparation, but we're talking about the use of quiz cards. So making sure students have got a bank of blank flashcards to use, and giving them some time to pick out a topic and to write some flashcards for that particular topic. Again, as you can see from the examples on the slide, you might have lots of diagrams, pictures in there as well, but to just kind of break down the key things to do with that concept or that idea. Again, you might want to limit them. You can only have 2 flashcards for this topic, which is forcing them to kind of summarise and just focus on the essentials. It might be a good idea for the students to have a set question on the front of their card, just so that this might help with the recall that's going to come on later. What we then suggest is over the next kind of couple of weeks, at random points in time, for parents to test students on the information they've written on those cards. So if they've got a question on the front, ask them the question, turn the card over yourself, you've got that as your prompt, and use that to help them to revisit the information. Again, you can give them some verbal prompts as and when you think that might be necessary. I think the really important thing to kind of reiterate with any type of revision is that with making sure it's a really active process. So as you can see from the graph in front of you, if we're comparing what students remember, if they're just sitting in front of a revision guide and reading it, it's about 20% of that information they're going to remember. If they're actually saying it, repeating it back to you, it goes straight up to 50%. If they're then doing something with that information, it can go up to 60%. So the really important thing to see is that once your child has revised a topic, encouraging them to keep revisiting it, but also really importantly, getting them to apply that to an exam question within the next few days, so that they are having to use it in the context that they would in the exam, and they're having to break down and put that information into their own words. Again, really important when your children in the next few weeks are doing those exam questions and that practice, be realistic with their timings. Get them to do it in the time that they would have in the exam. It's so easy, and we see it all the time, students handing in kind of pages long exam questions. If that's not what they'd be able to do in the exam, it's not going to be very realistic. Okay, the examiners know how long they have for these questions, so it's just important now to try and get them to break it down and to be realistic. Try and handwrite it and try and do it in the time that they would have in the exam. So the more practice they get of that, the better they will become with it.
Now, hopefully you found those examples that Miss Rings has given you really helpful. Just to find some further information, a range of websites that we feel are key to the success of students, linked here. But also, if you wanted to go online, obviously high street at the moment is a bit of an issue, but online, some resources, and speak to the teachers and your tutor, and to get some more information about this. So really appreciate you coming to listen to our presentation. What we'd like you to do now, if you do have any questions at all, stay on, and we'll minimise our screen and come on screen. And in the chat function, if you want to ask any questions, please do. And as we go, we will answer the questions. We go there. If there's any that we need to get a bit more clarification over, we'll make sure we take your details and contact you separately. But like I said, thank you for listening. This will all be online on the school website. And please do, we'll await your questions now. Thank you very much. Goodbye.